Hello, I'm Alix.
I'm Kelly.
And this is the Lit Joy Podcast. This episode is brought to you by our Valeris bookshelf alley. If any product could be like bookmarked on your calendar, make it this one. We have sold out of this product so quickly that we decided to bring it back, but it is as a pre-order. So the goal is to open it up for a sales window long enough for everyone who wants to buy it to be able to jump in and get it. The sales period is January 26th through February 19th, correct? Correct. And mark your calendar. I think if you go to our website, you can actually sign up to be notified. It's litjoycrate.com/Valeris, Velaris, which is a nod to the fact that the Bookshelf Alley takes place in Valeris during Starfall with Feyre and Rhysand. It's just a very beloved little alley that fits right in between your books. It's beautiful. So make sure to go sign up to be notified, and we out.
We also want to tell you guys about our reading journal that we have in stock right now. This is one of my favorite items that we've ever created. It is something that we try to keep in stock at all times, and it's perfect right now with the new year happening. It's a great way to keep track of your reading goals. There are so many different kinds of pages in there that are interactive. We've got lots of fun pages for tracking the books you've read. You know, there's book to movies. There's lots of pages where you can keep track of the books from all over the world. I'm trying to remember what that page is.
Yeah, there's like world travel pages.
Yeah.
There's also like bookshelf pages where you can fill in your book titles and color them in. So it's just like a really beautiful way to interact with your reading.
I love it because then you can really just keep track of your review, your star rating, your thoughts, favorite quote, things like that as well. And these are perfect for book clubs. I actually did give these out to everyone in my book club last year. Everyone's very excited to start filling them out. So just wanted to remind everyone to go check out those reading journals, and they do come in several colors.
And today we're going to talk about books that get you out of a reading slump, which is something that is a real phenomenon.
It is. It exists. And even the most avid reader, right, who, let's say, read books constantly, many a week or whatever that is, they fall into these slumps. And there are many reasons why they can exist. So we kind of just wanted to have a little quick discussion about what a reading slump is, what can cause them, what can help you get through them. And then we have our top 10 of books that we would recommend for people who might be in a reading slump.
That have for sure gotten us or others out of reading slumps. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about, Kelly, what are things that have gotten you into a reading slumps? Like personally?
Yeah. So I actually fell into one just barely, December, right? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that I fell into that slump was there was a lot of big life changes that happened for me. And a lot of times if there's a lot of pressure, a big change, clearly that takes priority. Other things fall off the map. And for me, reading is such a lovely, solitary, almost like treat for me. When I have some alone time or I have a minute where I want to sneak in a read, that's like my little, I earned this reward. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's how everybody views it. But in December, with everything that was going on for me, that kind of definitely took a backseat, my reading. So for that, it's like big pressure, life changes, job change, things like that. Or I was reading a lot of the same genre, which is another reason you can fall into a slump. Okay. Yep. I was reading a lot of romance. Nothing wrong with that. No. And I still thoroughly enjoy them. I think that just sometimes you need to break it up. Mm-hmm. Right? What about you? What has caused a slump for you?
Yeah. So I think usually there's a couple different times. Like I think it's different circumstances lead to like reading slump. But one of them for me is when I finish just like a really immersive, awesome epic fantasy. Like that tends to be like my favorite escapism is if I'm so engrossed in a fantasy that I don't even realize I'm reading anymore because it's like coming to life. And when I finish one of those and I feel like nothing will fill that void.
Like a book hangover?
Yeah, it's like a book hangover can kind of like slowly progress into a bit of a reading slump for me.
Yeah.
And then another way that I have experienced reading slumps is if I have multiple books going at once and I'm not interested in any of them. Right. So I tend to have like 2 or 3 books that I'm reading, like open book, like a hardback or paperback, and maybe 2 that I'm listening to.
Yeah.
And I kind of just decide on my mood. I know some people can't do that. They're like beginning to end, 1 book at a time.
Yes.
But I am really an emotional reader. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like, what do I want to read? Like every day, like I test my emotions and then I'm like, that's what I want to read. And so if I have multiple books going and none of them excite me, I know that's a me thing and I'm in a slump a little bit. And so I think that that's one of the things that kind of gets to me.
Yeah. And that reminded me of another one for me as well, which is reading a book I don't like.
Yeah.
Now, normally I would just say put the book down, maybe you gave it 50 or 100 pages, you didn't like it. But because I'm in a book club, I run a book club. We've talked about this. Sometimes I feel like I have to read it, because I want to be there for discussion and show up, whether I liked it or not. And so I find myself dragging my feet sometimes when it's a book I'm not loving, but still feel like I need or want to finish.
Yeah.
And then after that, it kind of almost feels like I need a break because I need to shake it off.
That was so much work.
Yeah.
Yes.
I need to shake it off. But those are like some of the things we've experienced, at least, just too many books or not reading the right one, or you read a real heavy one, like you were saying. I think we read what was it? Like
Anna Karenina?
We read like a Russian classic. It really was.
I'm like, there's some people where their jam is Russian classics.
Yes. Bless their hearts.
They can be.
I can't do it.
They're arduous. Is that a word? Arduous? I think it is.
Yeah.
And like, it's a very Russian style of writing. I feel like Russians have an endurance.
Yes.
As a culture.
Endurance with misery.
And long-windedness. I thought Joe Wright's Anna Karenina was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But watching that film, I'm like, yes, this was just as depressing as the book.
Yes.
And then War and Peace. Wait, was it War and Peace that had Lily James in it? And there was a TV series.
Oh, yes. I think that was right.
Gorgeous. Also really freaking depressing. Tolstoy.
Yeah, Tolstoy's not, for a
the
happiness
boost.
We will not recommend Tolstoy to get you out of reading slump.
That's a great way to put it. But I'm also like, there is
a place and a time for Tolstoy.
There's like a sense of accomplishment too when you like get through a book that you didn't love. I always feel guilty when I'm in a reading slump and I don't love the books that I'm reading because I'm just like, I feel like I know someone put their heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there are many books that I read where I'm like, this is not my favorite book, because I think that favorite means it's only a few, right?
Yeah.
And so I always feel guilty that I don't love every single book I pick up.
I always feel guilty when I read a book when I'm in a slump and I give it a bad rating.
Yeah.
Because I know it was not the right place, not the right time, not the right season, whatever it is. So a lot of times, if I can do it, I will try to go back and reread it to determine, like, okay, did I really feel this way about this book? Or was it a me thing? Was I in a bad place?
Might be a me thing. Yeah. It's true. I know. And also sometimes book club discussions make it so much better.
Yeah.
Like a book that you read in a reading slump. One thing I love about book club is it forces you to get through the book, and then you go and you talk with everyone about it, and then you see what other people loved about it. Like I read A Gentleman in Moscow, and it was maybe like a 4-star for me.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was enjoyable. I thought it was interesting. It's not classic Russian literature. I would recommend the book, but I listened to everyone at book club, and there are multiple people there who it was their favorite book they've ever read. They loved it. And it made me appreciate it more. And I think I bumped my rating up to a 4.5 because I was like, now I see what the author was trying to do and what it means to you. Actually, I think Blake Crouch, that was like his favorite book.
Oh,
remember
really?
when we interviewed him for book club?
Yes.
And he was like, I love A Gentleman in Moscow. And we're like, okay.
We've read that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But
it's not trying to be a plug for book club, but I love when we do go to book club and do that. And a lot of times we'll even discuss the book, like our ratings on it before we start reading. We used to do that a lot. Before we start discussing. We'll be like, what out of 5 stars, what would you give this? Then we have a discussion. Then we re-rate the book. And it's fascinating because so many people will change their review, their star rating, because they're like, I missed that. I have a better understanding now. I appreciate it. So mini plug for book clubs. I just think it's
100%
so great. Yeah. To see other perspectives. That's my favorite thing about reading in general.
Yes.
Is to get other perspectives, whether it's from the book I'm reading or the people I talk to about it.
That's literally how we started LitJoy.
Yeah.
Is we had read a bunch of the same books and we stayed up all night talking about them, and we're like, are we best friends?
I think we are.
Yes. It's like our energies just vibed because of books. And that's still like everything we do at LitJoy. We're still like, does it celebrate the joy of reading?
Yeah.
Like if it doesn't celebrate the joy of reading, then
doesn't meet our parameters.
It doesn't. And it's just, we can't generate any energy around it because that's what we love about LitJoy, is that love of literature. So Anyways.
Slight deviation.
I know. We're like, get off our soapbox. I know. Okay, so let's give some general tips about how to get out of reading slump. What are some things that you personally do, Kelly, to get out of reading slumps?
Well, apparently I should join a book club because I actually think that's a huge help.
100%.
If you feel like you don't like reading, let's say you even hate reading. I've had a lot of people who join my book club that have told me, I hate reading. Good luck. Yeah. And I'm always like, challenge accepted. And
masochist.
Yeah. And I'm always like, don't feel like you have to read the book. Just come, you know? Mm-hmm. And people immediately are like, oh, like I did not realize what reading could do. And they'll give it a go, you know? And so book clubs are great because I think it pushes you outside of what you're normally inspired to read.
Yeah.
And helps strengthen your love for reading or create a new love for reading.
Yeah.
I think it also expands your perspective, obviously, of all things. Yes. And like, I can't even give it a category. It's just, it expands your empathy. It expands your perspective. It expands your happiness. I love book clubs. So book clubs are a great way to either get into reading or get out of a slump.
I think so too. Yeah. I think also it's so interesting you mention that book clubs can expand your perspective because I feel like sometimes we get in slumps because we are just getting so much of the same perspective. It's just like we're reading the same genre. It becomes formulaic. Yeah. And I'm like, I might suggest if you're in a reading slump to read something that's completely different. Yes. Because that will force you to think differently. It literally makes your brain go and exercise brain neurons that it doesn't exercise all the time. Yeah. And so I'm like, read a biography, do an audiobook instead of a book so you can hear it. I'm like, if you're in a reading slump, I would highly recommend, I don't know if this one's on there. It might be. Did we put Green Lights on there? I'm like, one book that got me right out of a reading slump was Green Lights. Okay. I listened to it. It's Matthew McConaughey. Right, he narrates his own book. He takes you on a journey. It's a great way to get you out of a slump because he's an interesting person. And I was surprised by like the depth and the storytelling skill he had. And it felt much more like, it was like a memoir, but also like a story. Yeah. Like almost like a modern fairy tale is kind of how it felt.
That sounds like Matthew.
It was a very interesting book. So I'm like, I would change up the genre and I would change up the method that you're engaging with the work. Instead of doing an audiobook, pick up a book in hand. Instead of doing a book in hand, maybe do a graphic novel, something like that.
Yes. I'd never gotten into graphic novels until recently. The worldwide phenomenon, Lore Olympus books. It's by Rachel, can't remember her last name, but they're graphic novels about the gods.
They're so pretty.
I love them, but I love any mythological retelling.
Mythology.
And it's a Hades and Persephone focus, which is, again, something I've always loved since college. So that's another great way to get out. That actually helped me last year when I got in a slump. I just was like, I'm going to try this graphic novel. I've never tried them. Such a delight. Like an adult graphic novel is so much fun.
Would you recommend, what age would you recommend them to? Because Liam was just telling me yesterday, he was like, I'm so into mythology right now because they're learning about it in school and he's loved it. And Liam is like one of those kids where only two things in the world light him up. And it's like sports and girls.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I love mythology. And we're like, okay, we got to buy him some stuff. So like, would you recommend them for Liam?
I would say 18 and up.
Okay.
They're
adult content.
Correct. But my daughter has the Percy Jackson graphic novels and loves them.
Oh, they did all of them in graphic novels?
Yes, actually, they do have all of them except the new book that just came out.
Okay.
Yes, I believe they do. So she has all 5 and loves those. So I know he's probably familiar with it, but there's just something different in your brain when it reads like a comic, right?
Totally.
And you actually have to fill in the blanks almost in a lot of ways because the words are so limited. So that's my suggestion probably for him. And that is obviously kid-friendly. So
perfect.
Yeah. So another way to get out of a slump is kind of like we're talking about. You read shorter books. If you want to try to like get through the slump and not just stop reading, maybe try something like a graphic novel or something shorter that you feel accomplished when you finished it. So maybe it's just like a little novella or just a quick read.
Yeah, actually, I've totally done that. So I was in a bit of a reading slump the beginning, like early last year. And I actually went and read like 3 novellas back to back. that were novellas all related to series I had already read. So I was like revisiting characters I loved. And I feel like it just snapped me right out of it. Because I was like, I felt like pressure with my reading goal. I don't know if you said like a number reading goal.
Yeah.
But I was like 5 books behind because I had read a huge book that had kind of put me behind. And then I was in a bit of a slump, and just checking those 3 off of my reading list made me feel like right back in it. And I felt way better, like, and it's so interesting how reading goals can sometimes be the reason you get in a reading slump.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you can't reach that number. And so I've actually seen a lot of people on our To Be Read Instagram who are like, I'm not doing a number goal. I'm just setting like a goal to read a couple books outside of my genre or that kind of a thing. So,
yeah, I know there's a little bit of, I don't know if controversy. What am I trying to say? There's just a debate about like reading goals, I think, about what's the right one. And I'm all, this is purely personal. What motivates you to read? End of story. It's kind of how I feel about it, whether it's you're intuitively reading with what you feel that day, or I'm just going to read one book from every genre. I'm going to start a book club, like whatever it is, happy that you're doing it.
Yeah.
But for me, I need a goal too, like a number to kind of keep me motivated. Cause I'm that person that's like, I want to hit the check mark. I read it. I'm meeting my goal. Like, that motivates me, right?
Yes.
I missed it by 1 book this year. I was so mad. I tried desperately to hit my goal, but I hit the slump because there was some personal things going on, just couldn't get to it. And I was like, set that off to sea. It's fine. It's gone.
Oh yeah. I'm like, I made my goal this year, but I missed my 2022 goal by 2 books. And then the year before that, I went 3 books over. This last year, I set my goal at 30 instead of 50, and I read 46. So I'm like, what the hell? But the year before that, I could only get 30 done. And so that's why I set my goal down. I'm like,
oh yeah.
It's like you think there's a consistency to life, but life tells, the only thing that's consistent is that it's always different.
Yeah.
Yes, it's always changing. So I'm like, reading goals, if they're not helping you love reading, and then it's totally fine to change the goal, even mid-year, whatever it is. Like, it's fine to pivot in your reading journey, in your reading life,
Yeah. And that's exactly how I feel about it too, is just pick what works for you, whatever that goal looks like. Because right now, everyone's setting these goals, especially in our community with the bookish world. And there are a lot of people who have feelings about it. And I'm just like, whatever keeps you reading is all I care about, because that's what's important for me and our community and what we love to talk about. And like 2 years ago, I think my reading goal was like 20 books, honestly. Like I was so busy, I couldn't read. It was crazy. And then this last year was like 50 books, so it's fine.
Oh, so you read 48 books?
49.
I'm like, that's great.
Can you believe it?
That's great. I mean, there have been years where I've read like closer to 60 books, but I also was like, didn't have a job and was just like nursing my baby all day. So I'm like, there's seasons of reading too. Totally. So I'm like, just give yourself a little grace. That's another thing to get you out of reading slump. So.
And which reminds me of another one, which is what you've kind of mentioned. So my husband, who listens to audiobooks almost obsessively, he does audiobooks. And that's another great way. If you are like not in the mood to read a book, pick up an audiobook or try listening instead. This is a great way to get multiple books in too, if you want to actually add in more books, or if you just want to try something different. He listens to hundreds of books. Like, he's just constantly going through them that way. But that's how his brain works. He has actually a very hard time sitting down with a physical book and reading it. Like, he's so impatient to do that. And I'm kind of the same way. Like, I'll have a book and I put it on if I'm getting ready in the morning.
Me too.
Driving, if I'm cleaning. You want to do something that is so easy for your brain to do that you can still listen.
Yeah, like your lizard brain is busy doing laundry so that your other brain.
So you can really take in the information that you're listening to. Like, you don't want to you can't think while you're listening. I can't, at least.
I can't. So, like, I could never work at my computer and listen to an audiobook. So that makes sense.
It's perfect. And it's a great way to pass the time, just like putting on my makeup or vacuuming with my earbuds in. And it's a great tip, just like for people who are like, I don't have time. I'm all, well, could utilize a little more of your time if you just get it on your phone. And another thing we like to do is like double time the speed. I don't know why, but the audiobook readers are incredible. But when they read so slow.
Yeah. They're like, even the most avid of readers.
Yes.
get into a reading.
So I'm like,
slump.
double time that shiz and get that book going.
I hope actually, there's like a podcast moment, you can double time us too. Actually, when we listen to the podcast back, I always double time it because I'm like, I got to get through this shit.
No judgment.
I was like, and it's not that we feel like we're talking slowly. I think it's just people talk slower when they're in communication and listening than if you're only listening to somebody else's conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I have found myself even on Netflix being like, I wish this could be faster. And then they added the speed up version, but it looks really weird because they're like moving fast.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm like, so if you only have 30 minutes to be with us, like speed them up.
Yeah.
And that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's jump into the titles that we love. I love these. We both kind of collectively came up with a list of what we feel like is the best reading slump books to get you out of that reading slump. Okay.
And there's so many more. I think we just kind of picked the top 10.
We only have a certain amount of time.
They just like bubbled up to our brains of the books that we've read. But there's so many great ones. And I forgot to mention, I don't know if we mentioned about rereading an old favorite, did we?
Oh, yeah. Something I do if I am in a reading slump. I've gone back to a few old favorites. I've reread ACOTAR and Throne of Glass multiple times. I've reread Harry Potter multiple times. It's kind of like palate cleansing, I feel like, to reread an old favorite.
It reminds me of when you just want to relax and you are ready for something to watch and you just put on an old movie that you've seen a bunch.
Yeah. Outlander is like a palate cleansing movie.
Yes.
Modern Family or Parks and Rec for me.
Yes. I still love I watch New Girl still all the time.
New Girl's fantastic.
And weirdly, I binge watch the Twilight series sometimes.
At least once a year.
When I need like a good laugh or I just need to do a bunch of things and not know what's playing in the background.
The best part is that when you say if you need a good laugh,
I do.
It's like nothing about those shows is comedy.
But it's comedy gold.
It's golden. Just when she's like, wow, you have a lot of music. And I just
hang on, Spider Monkey.
Yeah. Okay. I just immediately go to the bad lip readings.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're so good for Twilight. The Twilight ones are the best that are out there.
Yeah. It's great.
Hunger Games is pretty close, but like Hunger Games quality of movie, I feel like is just different.
Yeah. We watch Pride and Prejudice all the time. Like that's one of our favorite movies. So it's the same with a book. Like if you're like, nothing is hitting for me right now, like picking up an old favorite.
Yes.
It's just to remind you of like, okay, this is what a good book feels like for me.
Yeah. And then you're like, I remember why I love reading.
Okay.
Book number 1.
So we're going to dive into our list of books to grab if you're in a slump. And I mentioned rereading an old favorite because the first book is one that I've read multiple times, which is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab.
We wanted to interrupt this podcast to tell you about a very important event that is happening at litjoycrate.com.
Oh my gosh, tell us.
I know. On February 21st, Lunicorns will get early access to the Vampire Academy Collector's Edition box set. So this box set is gorgeous. It has features we've never done before, which we always try and do something a little special, but this one is pretty epic. It drops on February 21st to Lunicorns, and it opens to the public on the 22nd. And if you're like, Alix, what's a Lunicorn? I can tell you. A Lunicorn is our nickname for our membership group. Our membership group is a group of readers just like you, but they come back to LitJoy and get extra perks. So they have early access. There's Lunicorn exclusive items. There's extra Lunicorn discounts. And we have a Facebook membership group where we do lives and we reveal product ahead of time, where we ask a bunch of questions or feedback on what product we want or they want us to do. So it's kind of just like this really cool book club, nerdy book club that we have at LitJoy. So make sure to check out our Lunicorns membership. It's titled Membership at the top of our website. And if you're just here for Vampire Academy, it opens to the public on the 22nd. So,
so excited for this.
Yes, me too.
I've read this probably 3 times. I don't know why. I am so drawn to this book. There's so many interesting elements in it. It makes sense to me. There's a lot of human elements. There's some mythology to it almost, old gods, right? But how would you summarize this book, Alix?
The pitch line is, what is a person if not the marks they leave behind? And essentially there is a girl in the book who she makes a deal. She's lives in France in the 1700s, and life is just not always great for women back then. I don't know if you knew that. Spoiler. Historically, women have been pretty much sold as property. So she's in a situation where she, really early in the book, you learn this, she's betrothed essentially, or is going to be forced to be married. And she doesn't want this life, but it feels like the only option for her is to have this life. And so she makes a deal with the devil, we'll say.
It's basically what it is.
To not live that life, but to live many lives. And she is invisible.
She becomes like almost immortal.
Correct.
But
people forget her as soon as she's not in their line of sight. And it's like meeting them for the first time.
So that was the deal with the devil, right? She can live all these lives and be who she wants and be independent and do whatever she feels like, basically.
Right.
But the flip side is, second she's out of their sight, they completely forget about her.
And the reason why I think this gets you out of a reading slump is because it's one of those books that force you to ask yourself, like, what would I do? Would I live in 1700 France and marry a person I'm not in love with and just live the life where everything is predictable? She could see from beginning to end what her life would look like. Or do you want to live the life of, the ability to experience, endless things, but to never have that close intimacy with a person.
Deep connection.
Right.
And this book, it spans 300 years, if I remember right, like quite a long time. And it's her experiences throughout life. And what's interesting is the old god that made the deal with her, with Addie, kind of keeps popping in and out of her life. Like he finds her and he's like in a human form. And they have this really interesting relationship because it's the only person in her life who remembers her that she can have a connection with. But I mean, he's the devil, basically. He's toxic. He's not great. But they do have a very interesting, convoluted relationship.
Like borderlines on romantic. Like there's like a fascination with one another. But
I think he's literally trying to like lull her to be with him in a sense and try to tempt her to leave the life that she's asked for, basically.
Yes.
But this book, it's so fascinating. I think there's just so much humanity in it too, because then she meets somebody else who actually remembers her.
It's beautiful. And V.E. Schwab, the way she kind of described it was, she was like, it was important. I wanted it to be my most beautiful and important book. Like the way that she described it in the interview was that she wanted it to be the best book she had ever written. And so, V.E. Schwab is so incredibly talented.
Yeah.
And we love her books. This one is my personal favorite.
Me too.
But I would also recommend any of her other books to get you out of a slump. Because I feel like she is really good at immediately immersing you in circumstances that you had never thought of before. And so,
absolutely. And just a quick summary, this is a standalone fiction book, which is also nice. You don't have to read the whole series, kind of a thing. And I thought this would be kind of fun to give the listeners kind of an idea of what this book is reminiscent of.
Yes.
So for The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, it is very reminiscent of like Meet Joe Black, right? Very similar. The Book Thief, Time Traveler's Wife, and The Age of Adeline.
Yes.
So it has all of those kind of compressed in with its own magical element. Yeah. It's so beautiful. I think I cried at the end. So.
Yes.
Anyways,
it's worth a read.
It's a good one.
I know. Okay, book 2, The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is a contemporary rom-com, women in STEM, academia kind of read. That's her sweet spot. Although she has a couple books coming out next year that I'm really excited for. So we'll talk about those in another episode. This one's great. The Tropes, Grumpy Sunshine. Essentially, there is. I think it's like unofficially a Raylo. Like fan fiction, in the sense that he is very much like a Ray or a Kylo Ren, grumpy, tall, long black hair, moody kind of professor.
Yes, please.
I was like, sign me up.
I love all those words.
Immediately, yes. And she is kind of like this bubbly and enthusiastic PhD student, right? Yes. So
it's just like, this is one of those just happy books that when you read it, you're smiling.
Yes, there's heavy elements to it, but the flirting is so great. I'm like literally skimming through this. I'm going to go back and reread that. That was such a fun book to read.
I need to read her newer one, The Love Theoretically.
Yes.
That one's getting great reviews too. So.
Okay, perfect.
Ali, I think her books are just refreshing.
Yeah.
It's probably a good way to put it. Just like, oh, lovely palate cleanser.
Okay, book 3, The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. We kind of can't stop talking about TJ. He just has this magical quality about his writing that spans from like middle grade all the way through adult.
Yeah.
Always has this really like deep heart feel to all of them.
Yes.
You just know that the character, there's this undercurrent of love in every one of his books.
There's like love, kindness, and just treating people the way you want to be treated.
Yes.
And I'm going to read this line about it because I think it's perfect to kind of give you a quick idea of what it's like. This is actually a YA contemporary fantasy that is 1984 meets The Umbrella Academy with a little hint of like Douglas Adams kind of vibe thrown in.
Yes, like kind of that dry humor.
Yeah. There's like that sarcasm where you're all, oh my gosh. Just kind of creeps up out of nowhere. And The Umbrella Academy, just like this found family feeling.
Like misfits.
Yeah, of misfits. But they're just the sweetest, and you are so drawn to these characters.
Yes.
You see yourself or you see others that you love dearly in these characters that he comes up with. And I think that's why I feel, and many people feel so close to his books, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's probably a lot of reasons, but
I think there's a second book in the series coming out next year as well.
Yes. Oh, this year. Well,
sorry, this year. It's 2024, folks.
That's right.
Fine.
100%. Still getting used to it, but it's not a prequel.
No, it's
a continuation.
It's a continuation, like book 2.
I'm so happy about this.
I know. I didn't anticipate it, and I'm excited to learn more about the story behind it. Oh my gosh, it'd be so fun to interview TJ.
Oh,
we should try to do that. I know. We should reach out to him.
I wrote down my feelings about it when I first read it, which is reading The House in the Cerulean Sea feels like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket during the cold winter storm.
Oh,
because it has that effect of just like, I feel so warm and cozy inside. And I also feel like there's like this invincibility feeling after I read his books.
Yeah.
Of just like, I know it's important and it's love,
yes.
You just feel so empowered.
I remember when reading Under the Whispering Door, there are hard things in it. It begins with the death of the main character. Mm-hmm. And there's also like, wandering spirits essentially that are lost. So I'm like, his books do a really good job of talking about things that are really difficult in kind of a magical way. Like, adoption or like abandonment, death, illness. And I think that you can tell he's a writer in his genius, doing exactly what he's meant to do. He's one of those writers too, where you don't ever get his books mixed up with someone else's.
No,
he has such a writing blueprint or like footprint of his own,
Yeah.
So
it's a great way to put it. And he's very inclusive as well, which I really appreciate. He has a lot of LGBTQ that he writes into, I think, almost all of his books.
Yes.
And he does it in a way that's just so natural and a little bit subtle, but it just feels so part of the story. You don't think twice about it.
Right. Which is like how people live their lives normally. Yeah. I think we get so bombarded with diversity conflict, especially over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
there's the token person.
Yeah. And like in either direction. Mm-hmm. And I think that the thing that's so wonderful about writing like this is it makes the point that humans are humans and that we all have more in common than different. And I love that it doesn't feel formulaic at all. Whereas like sometimes I think in fantasy, especially in fantasy, it was disproportionately white heterosexual for like hundreds of years, 200 years that we've had the genre. That's what it's always been.
Yeah.
And so I think it was so obvious when we started to see more characters of color or different sexual orientations. And that created like a lot of conversation around it. But I do believe that the genre is better. I personally believe the genre is so much better when people don't all look and behave the same. And so I'm like, I think diversity in books is so important.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is so important. But I love how he does it in a way that doesn't feel like meeting a quota,
Exactly.
because sometimes it feels that way a little bit.
It can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I get why.
Oh,
right?
totally.
For sure. But that's exactly how I felt. I'm like, there's just something that it just feels so effortless with his writing, where it's included. And then you're like, cool. And don't think twice about it, but it adds so much flavor to the story too.
Yeah. And he's a diverse voice himself. And I think that's why it's so important to have diverse authors, because it like lends to a more interesting and accurate depiction of humanity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, his books just for that reason, I think, get me out of reading Slump too, because they're unexpected. So,
and they always end in a way that you are just like glowing from the inside out. And you're just like, warm hug. It's like that Olaf moment. I'm just like,
hi, I like warm hug.
Like that's exactly, if I could epitomize his books, there's something about Olaf's personality that those two just go together.
Energy, where he's like, I'm just struggling with the existential crisis that is existence.
Yeah.
And he's like, with a smile. I know. Okay.
We should move on. Yeah.
I like book 4.
Book 4.
Friggin' love this book. This book is a blast from the beginning to the end.
It's a party.
It's a party. Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
Yep.
I respectfully would not recommend book 2. Book 1 was fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
It was a delight. It's like the world video game. We've talked about Ready Player One before.
Yeah.
Quick rundown if you haven't. It's a fantasy nerd utopia and a pure delight, as we wrote down in our notes.
Yeah.
Basically, it's 2044. The world is apocalyptic and everybody lives in a virtual reality.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this before. They live in the stacks, which is these like mobile homes just stacked like a mile high, basically. Like the world is so full, like overpopulated, basically. And everyone feels pretty miserable. It's like pretty gray life. So everyone lives in the virtual reality instead. And so they're playing this game, which is basically like the 1980s on crack in the game.
It totally is.
It's amazing. It's so much fun. And there are way more Easter eggs than I could ever pick up on because I think somebody actually did list them all out. And
it's just like Ernest Cline was a person who was like, I peaked in the 80s and we're going to write about it. Like, or not even peaked. It was like, that was like his obsession. I think when he sold this book, he bought like, what's the car in,
Oh, Back to the Future.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say the Mandalorian.
Me too.
But I'm like, I don't think it's the DeLorean.
Thank you.
DeLorean.
The DeLorean.
He like purchased the car from the film. Like he loves the 80s.
Yes.
And this book was like where he funneled all of his passion and creativity.
Yes.
And it's just like, it's like eating a full bag of Dorito chips. It's just like a blast the whole way through.
Good way to put it.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, highly recommend.
It's an indulgence, and you don't have to love the 80s. You don't even have to love video games to love this book.
Totally.
You will just enjoy the journey that you go on. And it's got a really fun ending as well. And it's not a standalone now, but it was for quite some time. He released the second book that we talked about, and we read it, and it was fun, but I kind of feel like you just really need to read the first book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Politely decline reading the second.
Decline.
I snorted.
I don't think people should let us do this anymore. Okay. Number 5, beach read. Another, it's a rom-com, but I will say this one felt heavier than Love Hypothesis. This one had some very heavy elements.
So yeah, this is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Emily Henry's always
another auto read.
Yes. Her books are great. Beach Read is not as light as I expected, like you were saying. Like it's not like a total beach read in that sense. But I thoroughly enjoyed the journey. Yeah. So
Grumpy Sunshine, both of them writers.
Yes.
And we've mentioned this one a couple times too. So it is a good palate cleanser if you haven't read, if you're stuck in a slump, this one's intriguing right away.
If I remember, this one is 2 writers who were both sort of in a writing slump.
Yes.
And they are staying in the same like seaside little village.
But they hate each other.
And they're right by each other, and they kind of don't like each other. But they both challenge each other to write the other author's genre.
Yes.
Right? So he has to write like romance, and she's trying to write something more like drama fiction. And it's fascinating to see them attempt those and what they learn from it. And they're both humbled, by the end. But then there's some heavy stuff in the middle there that I'm not talking about without spoilers. But by the end, Love fine
Obviously.
stuff.
And it's spicy.
Yeah. That's why it's on the
like
list.
a 3 spice.
Yeah.
I love beach read. So good. Okay, now we're going to pivot. We're going to go right into number 6. I'm so excited to talk about this one. I'll talk about this book every podcast. I just loved it so much. I'm like, it is science. It's
humor.
I mean, it's humor. It is I would say existential. It's space. So the main character wakes up in space and doesn't remember anything. He wakes up with amnesia and he slowly remembers that Earth is on the fast track to extinction and that he's in space because of that. And the whole story is about this Project Hail Mary and his role in it. And I love it. I'm like, as someone who firmly believes that there is life outside of Earth and intelligent life, I'm like, I'll call it, I don't care who thinks I'm crazy. I'm like, totally believe in extraterrestrials.
Yes.
Just from like a math perspective. And so this book, he's soaring through space. And of course, he has to think about that question. Like, are we alone? Is the end of Earth the end of life? And so it sounds a little gloom and doom, but he's such a charismatic character. You don't really care if he lives or dies by the end. You just like love the journey, I will say.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I'm going to read this one line because I have so many feelings about it. But so Project Hail Mary is one of those books, and this is my perspective, that restores your faith in humanity, even for the most jaded of us. Because when you put our minds together, all of our minds collectively, you can cooperate and collaborate and do incredible things.
Yes.
The literally entire world has to come together to try to save humanity. Like all the countries put aside any indifferences they have and they work to figure it out. And they put this incredible team together, including the main character in the book. Like he goes into space with a team. They don't all wake up.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed with Andy Weir, a lot of his books, it's a very solitary experience for at least one of the characters.
Yes.
The one in space.
And he's so good at creating mechanisms for us to connect with the person who's just talking to themselves.
And I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm not a big sci-fi person. Like, I don't love that genre. It's not my go-to genre hardly ever. But the ones we have picked for, our book club, or the ones that I just hear a lot of buzz about that I pick up and read, like this one, I'm like, I just absolutely fell in love with it. I adored this book. And the science, don't let it scare you. He, like you mentioned, the mechanism, he's so good at writing in the science in a way that's very palatable and easy to grasp and understand.
Yeah.
And it totally enhances the book in a fun way.
Totally.
It's not overwhelming where you're like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. So the science made it even better on top of an incredible story. Yes. And the book slowly unfolds as his mind continues to remember what's happening. Like throughout the entire book, right? You are remembering with him what's happening on Earth and why he's in space. So the tension right from the first page gets you. And I literally couldn't put this book down because I'm like, is Earth going to be saved? What's happening?
I know.
And then
I know.
There's a spoiler I don't want to bring up. But
no, don't do it. Don't bring it up.
I want to. But it is so good.
It was like one of my favorite reading moments of all time is when I got to that page.
Yes.
I was just like, yes.
So anyways.
I know. You'll get to that page and it'll be like, Alix screamed into the mic. I remember.
And highly recommend the audio. It's a full cast. It's incredible reading of the audio. So recommend that one 100%.
I know. And if you're like, I don't love sci-fi, but I want to be pulled out of, wait, hold on. We might have it on the list. No, I would just say Illuminate Files, another great sci-fi to pull you out of a reading slump.
Yep.
And buy the book, listen to the audio. It is worth every penny to do both and every minute of your time.
Yeah.
It's thoroughly immersive. Okay. Number 7, Fourth Wing.
This is like on every list we have.
By Rebecca Yarros. I just feel like because we have witnessed the mass appeal of the book.
Absolutely.
If you're not into reading or if you're in a reading slump, it's such an easy one for us to recommend.
Yeah. Because
of how many people have started to read it and just like are obsessed. And I'm like, oh, this is like a mass market romantasy, which doesn't happen with every romantasy, right?
Yeah. It is everywhere. Because I just traveled in December. Every single airport, everywhere I went, it was there.
I was in Singapore and it was there.
Yeah. It just happened so quickly. I feel like we're used to like a slower get going, but she debuted with this last year and it blew up within 6 months. So it was very quick.
Yes.
Iron Flame, book 2's already come out. Also fun.
By the way, Iron Flame, you'll hear a lot of buzz about people being like really disappointed in the ending. And I'm like, I think I have a theory on that. And let me know your thoughts, Kelly. I thought that the ending was not very. I predicted the ending of that book like by halfway through the book. Where I was like, oh, this thing is going to happen to either this character or this character. And that's what's going to have to be the thing they overcome in the next book. Yeah. Because it's a 5-book series.
Yep.
I felt like Rebecca like totally... she delivered the promise of the premise that it is a romantasy, that it is a fantasy. And oftentimes in fantasy novels, obstacles like the one at the end of book 2 are very common because you have to keep it going for 5 books.
Yeah.
So you can't just have him like have a happy ending at the end of book 2. And so I thought she did a great job of upping the stakes. I just am like, we'll defend the end because I thought it was a great way to end book 2, personally.
I agree. I thoroughly enjoyed the second book. I didn't see that exact thing coming that you're talking about, but a lot of people were really upset by the end. But I think you and I have just read so many fantasies that we like know there's a certain cadence and predictability about certain things. And when we knew it was going to be 5 books, we're like, there's going to be pulling together, coming back. There's going to be obstacles to over, like, yeah, it makes sense.
Totally.
All of book 3 is probably going to be a shit show for all the characters because
of the drama at the end of book 2.
Yeah.
Like, which is kind of the point because like you want to come back, right? I loved Fourth Wing and I loved Iron Flame. Yeah. I thought they were just very palatable, fun books to read. And even if you don't understand all of the intricacies of a magic system, that's why it's romantasy, because it's really about the relationship between those characters. And so I think that I love that it's a simpler fantasy for the mass appeal, that it can get more people into reading, similar to how Twilight did. Yeah. And Sarah J. Maas in some ways. I feel like her writing sometimes goes more into fantasy than romance, and that can be a little bit polarizing. I personally live in that zone.
I love it.
I love it so much. But I do love that Rebecca was like, reading's cool. Like, let me show you with this very immersive, fun experience.
Exactly. And this is the only book that we're recommending that's like a part of a big series, because normally I wouldn't. But it's exactly what you said, which is that it just appeals to so many people because there's so many fun moments in this story. So don't expect it to like completely change your life or anything, but it's going to make you
expect to pick it up and not put it down.
Yes.
Book 8?
Yes. Is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Again, not my typical genre to read. You know, this is a YA mystery thriller.
Yes.
And I think that I struggle with this genre because it feels so predictable a lot of the time, or, you know, there's always people who try to guess the ending. I don't know why it's just not for me. I'm like, I don't enjoy trying to guess the ending.
And I personally, this book for me was like a 3.5. Like I did not love it, but that for me, I know is because I don't love the genre. Yeah. And so I am just like very much not a murder mystery person.
I'm really getting people excited about this one.
But if I find in our book club, everyone loved it. Kelly and I just don't read murder mysteries often. I just personally
I gave it a 4, I think, but out of 5. But it was such a fun read, though, again.
And I couldn't put it down. Yeah. Like, I listened to it very quickly because I was so intrigued. So I just think the genre of murder mystery or thriller in general is really great for reading slumps because it makes it so you are so curious as a human. We are so curious about endings. And I feel like what's great about a murder mystery is you know that someone dies, or you know that, you know, and then you have to keep like finding out.
You got to pull that thread.
Each little next thing, you know. So.
And I specifically recommended this one for a murder mystery for those who don't always love the genre because it's too intense.
Correct.
Or like the content is, you know, trigger warnings, or it's just, you don't want something that's going to keep you up at night in that way.
Yes, it wasn't like serial killer scary.
Yeah. So it's lighter in the sense of the content of the mystery and the murder mystery a bit, but it's still going to want to keep you up because you're going to want to know how it ends.
Yes.
So in that way, it was a great read. And again, seeing our book club react to it, everyone was just in love with this. They loved it. And I apologize because this is also part of a series. I forgot. There are 2 more in the series, but you don't have to read them.
Right. They all could be standalones, but they kind of build on each other if you want them, if you wanted to read them all. Yeah. So. I also really did love The Silent Patient for a more adult version of a thriller. That's a really great one to bring you out of a reading slump.
That one's fascinating. Yep. Wow. Okay, I'm going
right.
to jump
now,
right into 9.
Talk about your favorite.
I know. I kind of forgot that we were going to be talking about it. So, Lore Olympus, the graphic novel series by Rachel Smythe. Is that, I believe you say it?
Sure.
And so it's beautiful. It's super unique. It is 5-star for me in the sense that the art obviously is gorgeous.
Yes.
I love it. It's obviously going to be kind of cartoon. That's the point of the graphic novel.
Yeah, it's like graphic illustration.
But each of the gods and goddesses that she's representing in the books has like a different color to them. And that's how you keep them straight.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like the main focus is Persephone and Hades. Love their story. But you get all the gods and goddesses and demigods and all these little characters that fulfill all the rest of the pages and enrich the story. And because it's a graphic novel, they're short. I can read one of the books, let's say they're 300 pages, hour or less, right? I'm done in like an hour and I'm like, read a book. Great. Yep. Check it off. And right now I believe she has 5 volumes out and there's more coming. So
I was like, I'm going to go home and immediately buy these and then the Percy Jackson ones for Liam.
Yes, they're so
I'm
good.
like, I'm so excited.
So I was going to say the synopsis, if it's helpful, is experience the push and pull love story of 2 Greek gods, Hades and Persephone, brought to life with this beautiful artwork. So there's lots of gossip, lots of wild parties, forbidden love, and witness what the gods do after dark in the stylish and contemporary reimagining of one of mythology's most well-known stories. So, and she's won lots of awards for this as well. So you guys got to go check it out. If you're not into graphic novels, just give this one a chance.
Love it.
Love it. Let's move on.
Perfect. The last one, number 10, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. We recommended this one a few times. There's a movie coming out or just came out.
That's right.
And this is a book that I think is just near and dear to our heart. And for sure, it came at a time when I think we both kind of were in a bit of a reading slump. And so it was unexpected. And really beautiful read by, it was Bonnie's debut novel. And I believe she's in her 60s.
I'm not sure.
50s or 60s. I can't remember. I saw an interview with her and she is kind of she's not a young writer. And
yes, for being a debut author.
I feel like her wisdom was so clear in this book. So this book is about a woman who, imagine if all men took women seriously.
Basically,
it's about a woman who essentially gets kicked out of her. She is a brilliant scientist, and because of the sexism that is the 1960s, she gets kicked out of her program when her husband is no longer in the picture.
Yeah, so it's also in the program. Yeah,
and so it is heartfelt. She empowers women around her through a TV program where she teaches women how to cook with scientific terms.
Yeah, she
takes fantastic.
Her science and chemistry and all of that and uses it in cooking.
Yes.
And teaches in a way that's so unique that people are so drawn to. And women continually flock to sit in on her recordings.
Yes.
And it just keeps growing and growing and growing and becomes this huge phenomenon. And the men actually start getting nervous, like, oh, she's got too much power, basically, that she's influencing all these women in their homes.
As is always the case.
Yeah. So it's frustrating in that sense.
Yes.
But it's so good. It's a great one.
I think we recommended this on our book club books. It's a great one for book club reads.
Yes.
It is highly recommended. I think what I loved about this book, this is more just a personal note. I have met that friction for my whole life. From the moment I was very young, I remember how uncomfortable I made men around me. And I grew up in kind of a traditional culture, so that could have been a part of it. But I still feel how uncomfortable I make some men around me. I tend to surround myself with men who are very much who very much believe in gender equality.
Yeah.
And that's who I welcome into my life. But I can just witness through this book, I could empathize so much with her because I think that women with strong voices were really of the first generation where it's politically incorrect to be sexist, but also there's still this residue of that sexism that is this current undercurrent in interactions. And we've had men that we don't know who, there was a man who was trying to sell us insurance for our company. And he was like, we told it was the first time he met us. And he was like, I'm just so proud of you girls. And I remember you and me being like,
ew,
gross. Do you not? And he's not trying to be unkind. He just didn't know any better. And you still are responsible for things that you don't know any better.
Mm.
And so I think that there's a lot of moments in here where there's varying degrees of like these men treating her different because she's a woman.
Yeah.
And some of them are just blatantly sexist, but some of them are just saying things like, that's so cute.
Yeah.
And they don't realize how patronizing that is.
Yeah.
And so I loved this book because I was like, it ignited in me like a fire, like a familiar fire.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also was like so great to talk about with other people and their experience. Because I know some people in book club are like, I've never had an experience like that. And I'm like, congratulations.
You're
like,
lucky one.
I know. It's like, lucky you. I was like, that happened to me like my whole life.
Yeah.
And so
definitely the different situations you put yourself in increase those interactions, right? And I think you and I, being women business owners, we tend to increase our experience working with men in different worlds and different, and so we've definitely had some interesting experiences and can kind of relate to what's going on to the character in this book, because this is like based in the 60s, basically, when they like had zero rights and they were the bottom of the barrel for giving them any kind of jobs and pay. And it's just so frustrating in that sense.
Yes.
And what I love about Elizabeth Zott, the main character, is that I believe she's autistic.
Yes.
And so for her, she's just like, that isn't fair. That doesn't make sense. That shouldn't be the way it is.
She says the thing that is the right thing to say.
Exactly.
Because she doesn't subscribe to societal pressure or norms.
Mm-hmm. So she's standing up for what she's like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not fair.
She's like, logically, women are not dumber than men.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, sweetie.
Yeah. And so it's just her perseverance in doing, in her mind, in a mind too, what's right.
Yes.
And what's fair for both sexes. And even down to how she treats her dog. Remember? Is it 30?
Yes.
What's his name? 63.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember why she names him 63, but she taught her dog 600 words.
Yes.
And she's like, don't limit people or dogs. Like, they can do it. You just got to give them the chance.
Yes. I think she was a wonderful character, wonderful story, and definitely got me out of a reading slump. So,
okay, well,
see,
that's our top 10 list of books that we wanted to tell you guys about to help get you out of a reading slump. And they've helped us get out of reading slumps, and wonderful books recommend for all kinds of occasions. But anyways.
And if there's a little social clip from this, it'll go on Instagram, I'm sure. Okay. I'm like, tell us what books got you out of reading slumps.
Oh,
so I'm like, we'd love to read some of those too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening. All right, reader. Thank you for listening to the Lit Joy podcast. Make sure to rate and review us.
And like a good book, don't forget to recommend us to your friends.